The most dangerous lie is the one people believe before the truth has a chance to speak. The private elevator opened onto the 23rd floor of Whitmore Medical Center, with a soft chime that seemed far too gentle for the moment that was about to destroy a marriage. Nia Carter Whitmore stepped out into the polished hallway, her heels clicking softly against marble floors that reflected the golden evening light pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. Outside, Manhattan glowed beneath the fading sunset, its skyline painted in shades of amber and gold. Inside, everything felt cold. She knew something was wrong the second she saw the faces waiting for her. Ethan Whitmore stood near the consultation room door, his 6'3" frame rigid beneath an impeccably tailored navy suit. At 38, the billionaire founder of Whitmore Technologies had become one of the most recognizable men in America. Magazines called him brilliant. Investors called him visionary. Employees called him demanding. Tonight, the only thing visible in his steel blue eyes was fury. Beside him stood his mother, Evelyn Whitmore, dressed in cream silk and diamonds that caught the light like tiny blades. Two members of the family legal team lingered nearby. No one smiled when Nia arrived. No one spoke. A knot tightened in her stomach. "Ethan," she asked quietly, "what happened?" He didn't answer immediately. His jaw flexed once. Then again. The silence stretched so long it seemed to swallow the room whole. Finally, he lifted a white envelope from the conference table. "You tell me." His voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that arrives after a storm has already made up its mind. Nia glanced at the envelope. Medical documents. Test results. She frowned. Earlier that week, Ethan had undergone a routine executive health screening, required by one of his insurance providers. Nothing unusual. Nothing alarming. At least that was what she had believed. "I don't understand," she said. Ethan took a slow step forward. "The doctor found something." Nia felt her pulse quicken. "Is everything okay?" His laugh contained no warmth. No, the single word echoed through the room. Evelyn crossed her arms. One attorney lowered his gaze toward the floor. Another shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Nia looked from face to face, searching for answers, finding only judgment. "Someone should explain what's going on," she said. Ethan's eyes locked onto hers. "I received a positive result." The words landed heavily between them. Nia blinked. Confusion washed across her features. Then she saw something darker hiding beneath Ethan's anger. Accusation. "Ethan," she began. He cut her off. "There is only one person who could have brought this into my life." The room seemed to tilt. "What are you saying?" Her voice barely rose above a whisper. Ethan dropped the envelope onto the table. The paper slid across polished wood like a verdict already signed. "I'm saying you betrayed me." Nia stared at him. For a moment she honestly believed she had misheard the words. 3 years of marriage. 3 years of building a life together. 3 years of standing beside him through every boardroom battle, every public appearance, every sleepless night when the pressure of running a billion-dollar empire threatened to consume him. And now he was looking at her as if she were a stranger, as if she were guilty. "No," she said softly. "No, Ethan." But the damage had already begun. Evelyn's expression hardened. One attorney quietly opened a folder. Somewhere beyond the glass walls of the hospital, a siren wailed in the distance. The city kept moving. The world kept turning. Yet inside that room, Nia felt the first crack split through the foundation of everything she had ever trusted. Then the consultation room door opened. An older physician stepped into the hallway carrying another set of documents. He looked from Ethan to Nia and then back to the papers in his hand. His expression changed. Subtly. Almost imperceptibly. But enough. Enough to make him stop walking. Enough to make him look down at the results again. And enough to make him read them a second time. The physician's hesitation lasted less than 2 seconds, yet somehow it felt long enough to alter the atmosphere of the entire floor. Dr. Richard Hale lowered his eyes to the documents once more, his silver-framed glasses catching the light from the hallway windows. For a brief moment, the certainty that had filled the room seemed to weaken. Ethan noticed it immediately. "Doctor," he asked sharply, "is there a problem?" Dr. Hale looked up. "I would like to review a few details before we continue." Evelyn Whitmore released a frustrated sigh. Surely the results are straightforward. The doctor offered a professional smile that revealed nothing. Medicine is rarely as straightforward as people hope. Nia remained silent. She stood near the window overlooking Midtown Manhattan, watching the city lights slowly awaken as evening settled over the skyline. Cars moved like streams of gold beneath the glass towers. Somewhere below, thousands of strangers were finishing work, meeting friends, returning home to families. Normal lives. Normal evenings. It felt impossible that only 30 minutes earlier she had believed this day would be ordinary. Ethan folded his arms across his chest. The anger remained in his eyes, but uncertainty had begun to creep into the edges of his expression. "What details?" he asked. Dr. Hale glanced at the paperwork again. "I would prefer to discuss that after I verify something with the laboratory." Without another word, he turned and disappeared through the consultation room doors. Silence settled over the hallway once more. It was not the peaceful kind. It was the heavy silence of people waiting for a verdict. Nia finally looked at her husband. The man she had loved for 3 years suddenly seemed impossibly far away. His expensive watch, his tailored suit, his familiar face. Everything remained the same, yet everything felt different. "You never asked me if it was true," she said quietly. Ethan's jaw tightened. "What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to know me." Her words landed harder than she intended. For the first time, something flickered across Ethan's face. Not guilt. Not yet. But discomfort. The kind that arrives when certainty begins to crack. Evelyn stepped forward before he could respond. "This family has spent decades protecting its reputation." Nia met her gaze calmly. "And I spent 3 years protecting your son." Evelyn's expression hardened. "Then perhaps you should have done a better job." The remark might have shattered her months ago. Tonight it simply exhausted her. Nia reached toward her left hand and gently turned the platinum wedding ring resting on her finger. 3 years earlier Ethan had slipped that ring onto her hand beneath crystal chandeliers at the Plaza Hotel. The newspapers had called it the wedding of the year. 200 guests. Fresh orchids flown in from California. A string quartet playing beneath golden lights. Every photograph had captured happiness. None of them had captured truth. Because even then, Nia realized now, people had loved the image more than the people inside it. The elevator chimed at the far end of the corridor. A young woman stepped out carrying a leather portfolio and a company-issued tablet. The moment Ethan saw her, his expression shifted. Vanessa Blake, his executive assistant. Her blonde hair was perfectly arranged despite the late hour. Her navy business suit looked untouched by stress. Yet something in her eyes seemed nervous as she approached. "I came as soon as I got your message," she said softly. Ethan nodded. "Good." Vanessa offered Nia a brief glance before quickly looking away. It lasted only a second, but Nia noticed it. And for reasons she could not yet explain, a chill moved through her chest. Because sometimes the truth arrives quietly. Not with accusations. Not with evidence. But with a single look that lingers one moment too long. Vanessa Blake had worked beside Ethan for nearly 18 months. During that time, Nia had seen her at board meetings, charity galas, investor dinners, and company retreats. She had never given the woman much thought. Why would she? Ethan employed hundreds of people. Trust was supposed to be the foundation of leadership. Yet as Vanessa stood beneath the warm lights of the hospital corridor, clutching her portfolio a little too tightly, Nia felt something shift inside her. Not certainty. Not suspicion. Simply awareness. The kind that arrives when a puzzle piece suddenly appears before the picture is complete. Vanessa cleared her throat. "Is there any update?" she asked. Ethan shook his head. "The doctor is reviewing something." Vanessa nodded quickly. Too quickly. Her gaze drifted toward the consultation room doors before returning to Ethan. "I am sure everything will be sorted out soon." The words sounded reassuring, yet something about them felt rehearsed. Nia watched quietly. Across the hallway, the city lights continued to brighten as darkness settled over Manhattan. The glass reflected everyone standing there, turning the corridor into a mirror filled with strained expressions and unspoken fears. Ethan's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen and immediately silenced the call. A second later another notification appeared. Then another. News traveled fast when wealthy people disappeared unexpectedly from evening meetings. Investors wanted answers. Board members demanded explanations. The empire never stopped moving, even when personal lives were falling apart. Nia remembered a different night 2 years earlier. Ethan had been exhausted after a difficult acquisition battle. He had returned home after midnight, shoulders heavy with pressure. She had found him standing alone beside the penthouse windows overlooking Central Park. For nearly an hour they had said nothing. They simply watched the city together. Before going to bed, he had taken her hand and whispered 4 words she never forgot. "You keep me grounded." Back then she believed him. Now she wondered when those words had stopped being true. The consultation room door finally opened again. Every conversation died instantly. Dr. Hale stepped into the hallway carrying a second folder. His expression remained professional, but his eyes seemed more focused than before. More cautious. He looked directly at Ethan. "I have requested additional verification from the laboratory." Evelyn frowned. "Verification for what?" "There are inconsistencies that require clarification." Ethan stared at him. "Are you saying the result is wrong?" "I am saying I will not reach conclusions until every detail is confirmed." The doctor's calm response only increased the tension. Vanessa lowered her eyes toward the floor. Nia noticed a small tremor pass through the woman's fingers before she quickly tightened her grip. On the portfolio. Again it lasted only a moment. Again Nia noticed. Dr. Hale continued. "The laboratory is sending supplemental records. They should arrive within the hour." An hour. 60 minutes. Felt like an eternity. Ethan exhaled sharply and walked toward the windows. For the first time all evening, his confidence appeared shaken. Nia watched him from across the corridor. He looked powerful, successful, untouchable, yet somehow smaller than she remembered. Smaller because fear had entered the room. Fear changes people. Fear makes assumptions feel like facts. Fear convinces intelligent people to trust the wrong evidence. As silence settled once more, Nia turned toward the dark glass overlooking the city. Her reflection stared back at her. Calm, controlled, composed. But beneath that calm, a realization was beginning to form. Whatever truth emerged tonight would not simply reveal a medical result. It would reveal something far more dangerous. It would reveal who had chosen trust and who had chosen suspicion the moment their marriage was tested. The next 50 minutes passed with the strange weight of a storm that refused to break. No one left the corridor. No one suggested coffee or fresh air. They remained trapped inside a space suspended between accusation and truth. Ethan stood near the windows overlooking Manhattan, his attention fixed on the city below, though it was obvious he was not seeing any of it. His reflection hovered in the glass like a ghost of the man he had been that morning. Nia remained seated several feet away, her hands folded calmly in her lap. The wedding ring still rested on her finger, catching the light each time she moved. Across from them, Vanessa checked her phone repeatedly. Every few minutes another notification appeared on her screen. Each time it did, her shoulders stiffened slightly. It was subtle, easy to miss, but Nia saw it. Years as a corporate attorney had taught her to notice the details people worked hardest to hide. Eventually, Evelyn broke the silence. This should never have become so complicated. Her voice carried the sharp certainty of someone accustomed to controlling outcomes. Sometimes facts are facts. Nia looked at her quietly. Sometimes assumptions wear the same clothes as facts. Evelyn did not respond. The words lingered in the air longer than either woman expected. A few moments later, the consultation room doors opened once again. This time Dr. Hale was not alone. A younger laboratory specialist followed behind him carrying a sealed folder. The atmosphere shifted immediately. Ethan turned. Vanessa froze. Even the attorneys straightened in their chairs. Dr. Hale approached the conference table and carefully placed the folder on its polished surface. His expression revealed nothing. Professional. Controlled. Measured. Yet there was a gravity in his eyes that had not been there before. "The verification process is complete," he said. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Ethan stepped forward first. "Then let's hear it." The doctor nodded slowly. He opened the folder and removed several pages. The silence became almost unbearable. Somewhere down the hallway an elevator chimed. Somewhere outside traffic moved through the city. Yet inside the corridor, the world seemed to narrow to the sound of turning paper. Dr. Hale examined the documents one final time. Then something unexpected happened. He frowned. Not dramatically, just enough to make everyone notice. His eyes returned to a specific line on the report. He read it again. Then again. The laboratory specialist beside him leaned forward slightly as if confirming what he was seeing. Ethan's confidence began to crack. "Doctor." His voice sounded tighter now. "What is it?" Dr. Hale did not answer immediately. Instead, he lowered the pages and looked directly at Ethan. "Before I continue, I need to ask a question." Ethan blinked. "A question?" "Yes." The doctor folded his hands. "Have you undergone any additional testing in the last 18 months outside of our facility?" The question seemed to catch everyone off guard. Especially Vanessa. Nia noticed her reaction instantly. The color drained from the woman's face. Just for a second. Then it was gone. Ethan hesitated. "No." Dr. Hale exchanged a glance with the laboratory specialist. Neither man appeared satisfied. For the first time all evening, uncertainty spread. Visibly across the room. Not uncertainty about a diagnosis. Something deeper. Something larger. Nia could feel it. The story everyone had accepted an hour ago was beginning to unravel. Thread by thread. Assumption by assumption. Somewhere within the growing silence, a different truth was waiting to emerge. And when it finally did, it would not merely change what happened next. It would change who everyone believed from the very beginning. The question lingered over the conference table like smoke. Ethan stared at Dr. Hale, clearly struggling to understand why the conversation had shifted away from certainty and toward investigation. "No," he repeated. "I have not had any testing done outside your network." Dr. Hale nodded slowly, though his expression suggested the answer had only deepened his concern. He slid one of the pages across the table. "That is precisely why this discrepancy is unusual." Ethan stepped forward. Evelyn followed. Even the attorneys leaned closer. Nia remained where she was, watching, listening, waiting. For the first time since arriving at the hospital, she felt no urgency to defend herself. The truth seemed to be moving on its own now. It no longer required her help. Dr. Hale tapped a section of the report. "This laboratory comparison references medical information that should not exist within the timeline we were given." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" The doctor looked directly at him. "It means there are records connected to your file that indicate a prior concern was documented months ago." Silence crashed into the room. Ethan's face lost color. "That is impossible." "That was my initial reaction as well," Dr. Hale replied. "Which is why I requested verification from 2 separate laboratories." Vanessa shifted in her seat. The movement was small, but this time everyone noticed. Her portfolio slipped slightly from her lap before she quickly steadied it. A single sheet of paper became visible for a brief second. Nia could not read the document, but she recognized the logo at the top. Whitmore Technologies. Vanessa immediately tucked it back inside. Ethan did not notice. Nia did. Dr. Hale continued reviewing the paperwork. "The timeline presented this evening does not fully align with the records now in front of us." Evelyn's voice sharpened. "Doctor, are you saying someone made a mistake?" "I am saying that assumptions were made before all information was available." The words landed heavily. Ethan looked toward Nia for the first time in nearly an hour. Their eyes met across the room. Neither spoke. Yet something uncomfortable passed between them. A memory, perhaps. Or regret beginning to form. Nia remembered every time she had stood beside him when public pressure threatened to overwhelm him. Every interview. Every crisis. Every headline. She had always believed that trust was strongest when circumstances became difficult. Tonight she was discovering how fragile that trust truly was. The laboratory specialist quietly handed another document to Dr. Hale. The older physician reviewed it carefully. His brow furrowed again. Then he looked up. "There is one more matter that requires clarification." Ethan exhaled sharply. "What now?" Dr. Hale closed the folder. Certain dates appearing in these records suggest that someone close to this situation may possess information that has not yet been disclosed. Nobody moved. Nobody even seemed to breathe. Then, almost imperceptibly, Vanessa lowered her gaze toward the floor. It lasted only a second, but it was enough. Because sometimes guilt does not announce itself with words. Sometimes it reveals itself through silence. And as the city lights shimmered beyond the glass walls of the hospital, Nia began to realize that the person who had shattered her marriage might not be the person everyone had spent the evening accusing. The room became impossibly still. Even the distant sounds of the hospital seemed to fade into the background as Dr. Hale slowly removed the final report from the folder. His movements were deliberate, careful, the kind of care that only appears when every word matters. Ethan stood frozen beside the conference table. Vanessa remained seated, her fingers wrapped tightly around the edge of her portfolio. Evelyn's expression had hardened into impatience. She wanted answers. Everyone did. Dr. Hale adjusted his glasses and looked directly at Ethan. The additional verification is complete. Ethan swallowed. Then tell me. The doctor glanced at the pages once more. For several seconds he said nothing. He simply studied the report. Then he read the same section again. A third time. The laboratory specialist beside him shifted uneasily. Nia watched the exchange carefully. Earlier that evening she had felt frightened. Then humiliated, then angry. Now she felt something else entirely. Clarity. The truth was standing just beyond the door, preparing to enter the room. Dr. Hale finally lowered the report. Mr. Whitmore, the original conclusion reached tonight was incorrect. The words landed like a crack through glass. Ethan stared at him. What? The assumption that your wife was connected to this situation is not supported by the verified medical findings. No one moved. No one even seemed to blink. For a brief moment, the entire corridor appeared suspended in silence. Nia felt her heartbeat steady. Not because she was surprised. Because she had known all along. Dr. Hale continued. Furthermore, the laboratory records confirm that Mrs. Whitmore's independent results show no indication of the condition discussed earlier this evening. Ethan's face drained of color. His eyes shifted toward Nia. The certainty that had filled them only hours ago was gone. In its place stood confusion, and something far more painful. Shame. Evelyn opened her mouth to speak but no words came out. For the first time in years she seemed completely unprepared. The doctor placed the report on the table. The verified records established that Mrs. Whitmore was not the source of the concern that prompted this investigation. The sentence echoed through the room. Final. Unavoidable. True. Nia looked at Ethan. He could not meet her eyes. Across the corridor, Vanessa's breathing had become visibly uneven. She stared at the floor as if afraid to look anywhere else. Dr. Hale noticed. So did Nia. The doctor folded his hands calmly. There remains another issue that requires explanation. Ethan slowly lifted his head. What issue? Dr. Hale's expression remained neutral. The timeline associated with these records indicates that information relevant to this case existed long before today's examination. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. Just 1 second. But it was enough. Nia saw it. The laboratory specialist saw it. Even Ethan noticed. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Questions that had once pointed toward Nia now pointed somewhere else. Somewhere much closer. Vanessa stood abruptly. I think I should leave. Her voice sounded strained. Nobody answered. Nobody gave permission. She gathered her portfolio and turned toward the elevators. Then Ethan spoke. Quietly. Vanessa. She stopped. The city lights shimmered beyond the glass walls. Reflections stretched across marble floors. And for the first time that night, the woman everyone had trusted looked like the only person in the room who was afraid of the truth. Vanessa's hand remained frozen on the strap of her portfolio. The elevator doors at the end of the corridor opened and closed again, but she did not move toward them. For several long seconds nobody spoke. The silence carried a different weight now. Earlier it had been directed at Nia. Now it had shifted. Slowly, relentlessly, toward someone else. Ethan took a step forward. Why are you leaving? His voice was quiet, yet the question cut through the room. Vanessa forced a smile that immediately collapsed beneath the strain in her eyes. It has been a long night. Stay. Ethan's single word stopped her completely. Nia watched from across the corridor. She felt no satisfaction, no triumph, only a growing sadness, because the truth was arriving exactly as truth often does. Not dramatically, not loudly, but piece by piece exposing everyone along the way. Dr. Hale closed the medical folder. I believe certain questions should be addressed before anyone leaves. Vanessa swallowed hard. I am not sure what you think I know. The laboratory specialist quietly placed another document on the conference table. It was not a medical report. It was an administrative record. A simple timeline. Dates. Appointments. Authorizations. Access requests. Dr. Hale tapped the page. Several months ago, inquiries were made regarding Mr. Whitmore's medical profile. Ethan frowned. What inquiries? Requests that should not have occurred without direct authorization. Evelyn immediately looked toward the attorneys. How is that possible? Neither attorney answered. Their attention had shifted entirely to Vanessa. Nia noticed the change instantly. People who spent their careers evaluating risk had suddenly identified a new source of concern. Vanessa looked down at the table. There must be a mistake. Dr. Hale remained calm. That possibility was considered. He opened another folder. Which is why every record was independently verified. Ethan's expression darkened. Verified by whom? 2 separate compliance departments. The answer seemed to remove the last refuge of doubt. Vanessa's shoulders slumped slightly. It was a tiny movement, yet somehow it revealed more than words ever could. Nia remembered the first time she met Vanessa at a company holiday gala. The young assistant had appeared ambitious, intelligent, eager to prove herself. Ethan had praised her efficiency. Investors liked her professionalism. Board members trusted her. Nobody had looked twice. Sometimes the most dangerous person in a room is the one nobody questions. Ethan stared at Vanessa. Tell me what is happening. For the first time, genuine fear appeared in her eyes. Not fear of accusation. Fear of exposure. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then finally whispered, I never wanted any of this to happen. The words settled over the room like falling glass. Ethan blinked. What does that mean? Vanessa's eyes filled with tears she seemed determined not to shed. It got bigger than I expected. Evelyn looked horrified. The attorneys exchanged uneasy glances. Dr. Hale remained silent. Nia remained silent as well. Sometimes people reveal themselves most completely when nobody interrupts them. Vanessa lowered her head. I thought I could control it. Ethan's face had become unreadable. The billionaire who once commanded boardrooms filled with powerful executives now looked like a man standing inside the ruins of certainty. Because the most painful betrayal is rarely the one that comes from strangers. It is the one that hides behind familiar faces while trust is still looking the other way. Vanessa's confession did not arrive all at once. It emerged in fragments, each piece stripping away another layer of the illusion everyone had been living inside. The hospital corridor remained silent as she lowered herself into a chair and stared at the polished marble floor. For the first time since Nia had met her, Vanessa looked small. Not powerless. Not innocent. Simply exhausted by the weight of secrets that had finally become too heavy to carry. I never expected it to reach this point, she whispered. Ethan stood motionless. What point? Vanessa laughed softly, but there was no humor in it. The point where everything falls apart. Dr. Hale remained near the conference table. The attorneys listened carefully. Evelyn looked as though she wanted to interrupt, yet even she seemed to understand that the truth needed room to speak. Vanessa clasped her hands together. When I started working for Whitmore Technologies, I admired you. Her eyes lifted toward Ethan. Everyone did. Ethan said nothing. She continued. You built something extraordinary. People wanted your approval, your attention, your trust. Her voice cracked slightly. And eventually I wanted those things too. Nia listened quietly. The city lights reflected across the glass walls, turning the corridor into a landscape of shadows and gold. Somewhere below, Manhattan continued moving forward. Taxis crossed intersections. Restaurants filled with evening conversations. Lives continued. Yet inside the hospital, several futures were changing forever. Vanessa looked down again. I crossed boundaries I should never have crossed. Ethan's expression tightened. What boundaries? She closed her eyes briefly. Professional ones. Personal ones. Ethical ones. The words settled heavily into the room. No details were necessary. The meaning was already clear. Trust had been misplaced. Judgment had been compromised. Assumptions had been built upon incomplete truths. Dr. Hale opened one of the administrative reports. The unauthorized inquiries originated from credentials linked to company resources. Vanessa nodded slowly. I know. Ethan looked stunned. You access private information? Not at first. Her answer came quietly. At first I only wanted answers. Then I convinced myself I was protecting you. Nia felt sadness more than anger. She had seen this pattern before during legal cases. People rarely began with destructive intentions. They simply justified one bad decision until it became impossible to recognize themselves. Vanessa wiped her eyes. Every choice after that became easier. The attorneys exchanged uneasy glances. Evelyn looked away. Ethan remained silent. The silence itself felt like a verdict. Finally, Nia rose from her chair. The movement drew every eye in the room. She looked at Vanessa, then at Ethan, then at the wedding ring resting on her finger. For a moment nobody spoke. Nia slowly removed the ring and held it in her palm. Not dramatically, not angrily, simply calmly, deliberately, like someone accepting a truth she could no longer avoid. Ethan's face changed instantly. Nia. It was the first time all evening he had spoken her name without accusation. She met his gaze. The medical report did not break this marriage. Her voice remained steady. The lack of trust did. No one argued. No one could. Because some relationships survive mistakes. Some survive scandals. Some even survive public humiliation. But trust, once abandoned, rarely finds its way home unchanged. 1 year later, the Grand Meridian Ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers and golden light. The annual Hope and Dignity Foundation Gala had become one of the most respected charitable events in New York City, drawing business leaders, attorneys, philanthropists, and community advocates from across the country. At the center of it all stood Nia Carter. Her elegant black gown reflected quiet confidence rather than extravagance. Her natural curls framed a face that no longer carried the weight of proving anything to anyone. She had spent the past 12 months building something remarkable. What began as a small legal initiative supporting people who had been falsely accused, publicly judged, or professionally damaged by misinformation had grown into a national organization. Thousands had found help through her work. Thousands had found hope. The ballroom erupted in applause as her name was announced. Nia smiled warmly and walked toward the stage. The lights followed her path, but she seemed untouched by them. There was no need to seek validation when peace had already been found. Near the back of the room, Ethan Whitmore sat alone at a table overlooking the stage. The past year had changed him in ways no financial report could measure. Whitmore Technologies had survived the scandal, though not without consequences. Several executives had resigned. Internal investigations had forced difficult reforms. Vanessa Blake had quietly disappeared from the corporate world after accepting responsibility for her actions. Yet none of those losses compared to the one Ethan felt every morning when he woke up in a penthouse that no longer felt like home. He watched Nia step onto the stage. The woman he had once accused now stood before hundreds of people as a symbol of integrity. She had not destroyed him. She had not humiliated him. She had simply moved forward. Somehow that hurt more. The master of ceremonies handed Nia the award. The applause continued for nearly a full minute before finally fading. Nia approached the microphone. The ballroom became still. She glanced across the audience. For a brief moment her eyes found Ethan. Neither looked away. Then she smiled gently and began speaking. "A year ago I learned something important," she said. "The truth does not always arrive when we want it to. Sometimes it arrives after assumptions have already done their damage." The audience listened carefully. "But I also learned that dignity is not something another person can give you. It is something you choose to keep." Several guests nodded. Others wiped away tears. Nia continued. There will always be moments when people misunderstand us. There will always be moments when others doubt us. What matters is whether we remain faithful to who we are while the truth catches up. The room filled with applause once more. Ethan lowered his eyes briefly. He remembered the hospital corridor, the accusation, the certainty, the moment he chose suspicion instead of trust. Some mistakes cost money. Some cost reputations. His had cost something far greater. After the ceremony ended, guests gathered throughout the ballroom. Conversations flowed beneath soft music and warm light. As Nia prepared to leave, Ethan approached her. Neither spoke immediately. Years of memories stood quietly between them. Finally, he said, "I am sorry." Nia studied him for a moment. The apology was sincere. She could hear it. She could see it. And perhaps most importantly, she no longer needed it. "I know," she replied softly. Ethan nodded. A faint smile appeared before fading again. "You deserved better." Nia looked toward the city skyline beyond the ballroom windows. Maybe that was the lesson for both of us. There was no anger in her voice. No bitterness. Only peace. Ethan understood then that forgiveness and reconciliation were not the same thing. She had forgiven him long ago. But her future no longer belonged to the past. Nia offered one final smile before turning toward the exit. The ballroom lights reflected across the polished floor as she walked away with steady confidence. Ethan remained where he was, watching her disappear into a future she had built herself. And as the doors closed behind her, he finally understood a truth that no report, investigation, or apology could ever change. The greatest loss of his life had not been caused by deception. It had been caused by the moment he stopped believing the woman who had never stopped believing in him.